Same news after the press conference last week. Since I met with you and talked with you, what are 3 stories I pick up here? One is the investigators fail in bid for the JFK files. Here's a man, Harold Weisberg, who's written 4 books on the John Kennedy assassination, who used to work at the FBI, who sought reports, FBI reports, on certain bullet fragments taken from John Kennedy's body, another public assassination for all the world to see. He said the Warren Commission wasn't given the full reports and based its conclusions on inadequate and misleading information. And Harold Weisberg placed a suit that's gone up from the lower courts up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court refused to review an appeals court decision that the FBI can keep all the Kennedy files secret under the provision of the Freedom of Information Act. Now, Weisberg said, he made it clear, he said, the courts acted as rubber stamps all along the way. They allow secrecy, even though no federal law was violated in this case. No prosecution is contemplated by checking these bullets out, and disclosure would not harm the agency's legitimate law enforcement functions. Well, Harold Weisberg is wrong about that. If the truth of the Kennedy assassination were out, it would harm the agency's legitimate law enforcement function, because it seems that their legitimate function is to represent the status quo, and when you kill somebody, they seem to think it's legitimate. In their interpretation, it lends, I don't know, the way you use the term national security, it lends to 2 different views of what they mean, but the FBI will not allow anybody to examine evidence that Oswald did not kill John Kennedy. Weisberg said photographic analysis could further determine if different guns were used by finding trace elements incompatible with Oswald's weapon. So 10 years later, the same FBI, it hasn't changed faces or changed hands with administrations. Mr. Kelly hasn't changed a thing. The Supreme Court hasn't changed from Earl Warren to Warren Burger. And the Supreme Court turned down a 10-year struggle to prove that the rival that Oswald had did not kill President Kennedy. And the same day that they turned that down, May the 14th, Baxter Ward opened up in Los Angeles the evidence of a second gun in the Robert Kennedy shooting. And he brought out a lot. There were 3 witnesses at the hearing. The LA Times did have an article, not by Jerry Cohen, the persistent question of whether Sirhan acted alone in the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy, or whether an overlooked second gunman was involved, reopened Monday by the Los Angeles County Supervisor Baxter Ward. There was a 3-hour public hearing. 8 scientific experts and county officials testified. Criminologist Herbert Leon McDonald, director of the Laboratory of Forensic Science in New York, said the 2 bullets taken from the Ambassador pantry did not come from the same gun. One bullet that was marked by Coroner Thomas Noguchi was taken from Senator Kennedy. The other was marked with the initial Dwayne Wolfer, head of the Los Angeles Police Department Crime Lab, from the stomach of newsman William Weissel. The bullets don't match each other in their manufacture or the manner in which they were marked as in the passage when they went through the gun barrel. The firearms testimony was backed up by criminologist William Harper, who for 35 years worked as a forensic expert for prosecution and defense in local trial. And Thomas Noguchi, who did the autopsy, revealed he started 2 days after the Kennedy assassination to explore the possibility of neutron activation analysis of the bullets and bullet fragments taken from the pantry, and then he was advised not to do this. And although his evidence of where the bullets came, Thomas Noguchi, was not consistent with where Sirhan was standing. After the hearing, the district attorney's office deferred to Lynn Buck Compton for a response, and the district attorney said this was simply a political ploy, that there wasn't anything involved, and they put it down, even though criminologists from all over the country have been working on this case. And so the Robert Kennedy situation is wide open. The fact that Sirhan did not fire the fatal gun or did not get any bullets into Robert Kennedy, and the Supreme Court the same day was turning down the evidence that Oswald did not shoot into President John Kennedy. And if that isn't enough, May the 14th, the Boston announced, the Associated Press, that the House Judiciary Committee, which is considering impeachment proceedings, has requested a full set of records of the closed inquest into the death of Mary Jo Kopechne. They summoned from the judiciary the Social Law Library in Suffolk County Courthouse and requested a full set of copies of the records and the lawyer's brief in the case. A girl named Margaret Carroll, who was Mary Jo Kopechne's roommate at the time of the incident, filed a suit last August charging the White House aide John Ehrlichman and two former city policemen, White House payroll, took part in illegal wiretapping on her phone. They were Anthony Laswitz and John Caulfield. And if you read the White House tapes, there's the mention of Laswitz doing a favor, a good job for Richard Nixon. Colin gave Tony Laswitz $100,000 the summer of '69. Caulfield and Laswitz and Hutt and all of them were involved in the Chappaquiddick affair. And if the truth were open, if the judiciary would ever go into there and they're too afraid to touch it or the Wallace shooting, you would find that Ted Kennedy was not driving a car. And it's very important to open this up, but I think they're too afraid. I don't think a million letters would force them to open this up, because they'd have to face all their lies and all their cover-ups and indiscretions and ignoring the truth for the past 10 years. But the top people that I mentioned that are out of office are moving out and will be, if not in prison, lose their law degrees and demoted from positions of power. So we have to write about the Donald DeFreeze affair and the burning of these people and the slaughters in California. Where is the blame for all of this? Where is it coming down? Where does it lie? It has to go from the top down. It can't just happen at the street level. If you read Tackwood's book, if you study the prison conspiracies, the state conspiracies, it has to have approval from the top, the National Security Council, Army intelligence. A lot of them were involved, like the Manson thing, the safe houses, the Barker Ranch, Spawn Ranch. This terror that's coming in California has to have the approval of the Attorney General, and he sits every day with the National Security Council. Another problem is the CIA in the police departments, the use of their provocateurs, their fomenting violence, the use of Stanford research and behavior modification. We should stop all of that now. Colston Westbrook, the military man from Southeast Asia, going into the Vacaville prisons, right from a CIA program of idea to a man like Donald DeFreeze who worked for the LA Police Department. These things have to be stopped. There is a way to stop it if we had an ability to subpoena the files of these people and what they were doing. Now, after Donald DeFreeze was dead, the San Jose Mercury comes out with an article, A Puzzling Figure, the Man Sin Q, Who Was He? They said to those he commanded, he was a prophet, a leader in the tradition of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. That was the image they gave him. I have about 7 minutes, and maybe I can read in 7 minutes a letter Donald DeFreeze wrote to a judge before he was turned into a zombie at Vacaville by the CIA and the California Department of Corrections. In 1970, he had been serving the LAPD as an informer. He had been kept from 9 serious charges. Now he was going to jail. It was 1970. He didn't want to go. Dear Sir, he wrote to the judge. These are excerpts from the letter. I only have time. He wrote it in 1970 on a robbery charge shootout to Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge William L. Ritzi, R-I-T-Z-I. Dear Sir, I know you may think I'm trying to be funny or smart because I sent you a motion for a recall of sentence and commitment and you denied it. I'm sending you another one with this letter. What I want to do is just talk to you. That's all. I want you to hear the truth of everything. You never gave me a chance to talk or anything. I am in jail, but I still want to let you know what really happened and why. I'm going to talk to you truthfully, and like I'm talking to God, I will tell you things that no one has ever known. To start a story of a man's life, you can't start at the end of this story. You start at the age 16. At that age, I just got out of a boys' school. I did 2.5 years for breaking a parking meter and stealing a car, and the judge said that is the best place for you. And I hated it. I never had a home. Prison was my home. There was nothing but fear or hate there, day in, day out. It was maddening. I only had 2 fights. I stayed out of fights. I wanted to be friends with everyone. This other inmate would not allow it. They'd try to make fights. They'd try somehow to make a homosexual out of me. I found myself hated by the boys out there, and I got out of jail. People couldn't believe I'd ever been to jail. I worked hard. I didn't drink or pills. I didn't curse. I didn't hang out at night in the street. I believed in God. I tried to lead a good life, and I was still lonely. I didn't love anyone, and didn't anyone love me, and I had a few girlfriends. But as soon as their mother found out I'd been in jail, that was the end. Then one day I met Gloria, and she was nice, and I fell in love. I was 18, and life was real to me. I asked her to marry me. My wife had 3 kids, and we were married, and things were lovely for a few months. And I worked, and while I was at work, she had relations with a friend, and I was very, very mad and hurt. And I told the boy he could have her if he wanted her. And him, before I killed someone. And the boy said he didn't want her at all. And that's where his violence began, when he was betrayed by the person he loved. He didn't kill or hurt, but that's how he felt. He said he found out my wife's kids all had different fathers, and that she had never been married. But he went back to her, and then later the boss comes to his house, and his wife is nude. And that hurt him, and she was playing these games on him. I closed my eyes to it all. I loved her and the kids, and I did everything I could. And I thought if we had kids or a baby, we'd be closer. And when the baby was born, it was the same thing she was doing over again. And I started to drink, and she wanted a divorce. And I became completely destroyed. And then I got a hammer and destroyed everything in the house I bought her. I mean, everything. And she begged me to take her back, and she said she had made a mistake and really loved me and made a home for me and my kids, and he had 3 children with her. And then she began to chase around and have men again. And he said, I finally got into trouble. He was unhappy. He got into trouble. He slipped away, and he would go in his basement. He was making bombs and working with firearms. He left New Jersey, moved to California, and tried to find a way of life. He got in wrong in California, started playing with guns, drinking pills, was arrested, and that's when the police department started letting him off charges, arresting him, letting him off, arresting him, letting him off, until they began to use him as an agent. And he asked his lawyer, what should I do? And he said, well, if you have to serve yourself and get out, become an informer for them. And he worked for them. He said, I worked in 2 jobs, and he tried very hard. He said his wife came back. I got her everything she wanted, TVs in every room. Her home looked better than a movie star's. He tried to hide his unhappiness and weakness. He worked 22 hours a day. He had no peace, and she wanted more. Then finally they sent him to Chino, and he tells about it. And that's what Don Fried was talking about. When they realized he was talking about God and had second feelings about the work he was doing for the LAPD, they sent him to dry him out, to unleash him. He wasn't good to them anymore because he was having second feelings. And he said, you sent me there, and I lied to them. I didn't tell the truth. I want to tell the truth now. They think I'm nuts. God has told me I would go home if I believed in him, and changed my life and forgave everyone that did me wrong, and my wife also. And he pleads with the judge, and he gets home, and when he comes home, his wife is there having sex relations with some other man. So he's forced back out into the streets, and he comes to California to give himself up. He's ready to go to the court. I wanted to get away from her somehow, and I said to myself I would go with them, my wife and kids, to New Jersey and help them fix things up. It wasn't working, and he came to California. His wife kept asking for money. He had a chance to steal $1,500. He took just $100 and gave it to her, but he kept being driven back to the streets, and they had him on these petty robberies, and they used him. He said, sir, don't send me to prison again. I'm not a crook or a thief, nor am I crazy. I hope you will believe me. I am foolish, honest and truly. I was very proud and very weak when it came to my wife, but that's over and gone. And if you ever call me back or want to see me again, thank you. Even if you don't, he says to the judge, if you don't call me back or want to see me again, thank you for all you've done, and all I can say is God bless you. That is the letter that Donald DeFries wrote. A black man in a society, no jobs waiting for them, used by the police department. Last week, if you heard the tape, you heard that pathetic plea that Don Fried made of how our society uses these people instead of offering them opportunities. I couldn't feel worse about those murders in L.A. if than if they were my own, for the simple reason that they